Right, the flow of joiners seems to be slowing down a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today. Today, we're going to be talking a lot about getting invoices out the door, how we're able to collect payments faster, and start to improve cash flow for your business. So I will get started. A couple of quick housekeeping items. Questions are encouraged. We do have time at the end reserved for questions, so as they come up, feel free to put them in that Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer those as those come in. There is also a few resources in the resources section at the bottom of your screen. Those are going to include things like information about this. The presentation that we have is linked within there as well. And then any other questions that you might have, like I said, just pop them in that chat. I'm going to go ahead and get us started and kick off here. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining. My name is Ben Mascow. I am the Director of Sales and Solutions Consulting over here at BigTime. I've been in the professional service space for the last 6 years. All I do all day long is consult firms on best practice workflows, not just in today, like we're going to speak about billing and invoicing, but across all the whole suite of our platforms. So, Diane, I'll pass it over to you to do a quick intro.
Hi, my name is Diane Parrish, and I'm with the IQ Business Group. I've been with them since 2005. We're a government contractor, and we offer records management, cloud-based solutions to government entities and also commercial entities.
Great. Thanks, Diane. Josiah?
Hi, everybody. Great to be here today. My name is Josiah. I'm with Titus Talent Strategies. We partner and serve businesses in the areas of talent acquisition, optimization, development. We are based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but kind of work across the US in about 30 industries. Specifically within the business, I work in our corporate operations division, managing and leading the team that's responsible for our time and billing and invoicing, as well as most of our internal analytics and reporting.
Great. Thanks, Josiah. And then Tamara, would you mind introducing yourself as well?
Yes, I am Tamara Smith, and I am a controller with New Resources Consulting. I've been with the company for 16 years now. We've been with BigTime the whole time. We are a technology consulting firm with expertise across multiple industries.
Awesome.
Yeah, so happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. So for today's webinar, we're going to go over a few different things. One, I'll start off with a quick overview of who's BigTime, what do we do. Then we're going to spend the bulk of our time actually in a moderated discussion with the panelists. So we'll get to understand, some of the challenges they used to face, currently face with their billing workflows, where we've been able to help them out, general tips and tricks. I'll tell our panelists it doesn't all have to be praise for BigTime. It can be other great things that you've learned about your business too. We'll talk through some of the key takeaways from the discussion, and then we're going to leave about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for Q&A and next steps. We'll also be sharing out information for how to gather the recording, and then some other items that are coming up as well. So who is BigTime? We're a professional services automation platform, so we handle everything from quote to cash and then planning our resources as well. We offer solutions in CPQ, so being able to configure, price, quote all of your items, integrate that with your CRM. Resource management capabilities, so planning and forecasting, staffing, and being able to forecast both, resource capacity, availability, hiring forecasts, and then revenue and margins associated with your projects as well. Project delivery in terms of time, expense capture, being able to do live analytics around your projects there, and then getting invoices out the door, which is we're going to spend the bulk of our time facing that today. We've been in the industry for a little over 20 years. We were founded in 2002. We've got about 3,000 or 2,800 customers across the U.S. and internationally. And then, like I said, we're just very proud to be part of all this ecosystem. We've worked with Intuit for a long time on these items. So thank you all so much. I'm going to get us started in the panel here today. So I think what would be really helpful, I kind of want to go through and start talking about and just I think I'm going to pick on you first. Just because you and I had a pretty good discussion in that pre-conversation. Let's start with some of the challenges and things like that you were facing that led you to go explore new solutions. Would be helpful to hear from you.
Yeah, for sure. So we actually came back to BigTime in 2022. Our business was running on BigTime around 2012, 13 to about 2015. We had moved away to another product at that time that felt like it was going to fit kind of the needs of where our business had grown to.
Mhm.
And the long story short there is that that platform in particular started to kind of break down, for lack of a better way of describing it. Our month-end process, which typically involves probably sending out somewhere between 300 to 400 invoices to our clients, was increasingly manual, error-prone, lots of delays, particularly because the product itself was just unreliable. So we were feeling a lot of those pain points prior to coming back to BigTime. And by the time we had looked at BigTime again, we saw, okay, in the last, 7-ish years of being away from the product, there had been a lot of development. And so it ended up just being kind of an ideal fit to help deal with the amount of volume that we needed to do in our month-end process, as well as doing so in a way that's quite scalable and efficient for a pretty lean internal team.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a theme I hear from a lot of people, right? Like in professional services, headcount in back office staff tend to be kind of the leanest department. So driving efficiencies all throughout there can always be so important. I talk
True.
with a lot of customers that have, yeah, like you said, issuing hundreds of invoices a month across 1 to 2 FTEs doing that full time. So it can be quite a challenge at that volume. And then
Definitely.
Tamara, I know you've been with us for the entirety of your time, but I think it'd be helpful to hear kind of like your growth story through BigTime. I know that like you've looked at a lot of it, and then just like how you get involved in the billing process.
Yeah, well, we started with BigTime in October of 2003. I think you mentioned BigTime started in 2002.
Yeah.
So it was a year old when we started with it. Back then we had about 15 users. Now we're up to 200. I was digging into some other numbers too. Our client count was about 10, and now we're up to about 60. And just for some revenue numbers, I don't have numbers going back that far because we had a few different systems that overlapped. But back in 2008, we did 12 million, and in 2024, 33 million, and we're forecasting about 35
Oh, that's
for
awesome.
2025. So lots
What
of
do
growth. Been with BigTime all through it. It just, it really helps us. It helps us see it through.
That's awesome, and I love hearing growth stories from clients. What do you attribute a lot of that growth to, like in the marketplace in general?
I think it's just the efficiency. I mean, I look back to, we had a sister company that wasn't with BigTime at the time when I first started. And I remember just the pain points of invoicing, the Excel spreadsheets and invoicing one email at a time. I mean, maybe some of us can remember doing that. And, BigTime with its reporting tools and just bulk invoicing, things like that, just really helps get everything out the door faster.
Great. I love hearing that. Diane, you're another very long time client. I love having all you on the call. So talk to me a little bit about your growth journey with BigTime. Like, right, like I think BigTime was in place when you started, or maybe it was just being implemented. Oh, you're on mute. So share a little bit
We
about that.
we were previously using Spring Ahead, which for just time and expenses. And in 2013, we were on QuickBooks Desktop at that
Mhm.
time. And we migrated over to Spring Ahead or to BigTime in order to make track our expenses and time closer to our projects and integrate into QuickBooks, which helped a lot. Our processes were manual, and some of ours still are. Since we are a government contractor, a lot of the entities that we do work for have a lot of requirements on their invoices. So in the beginning with BigTime, we could not make it meet those requirements. We migrated a year ago on to QuickBooks Online, and that that was a tough migration coming from QuickBooks Desktop, but BigTime has come so far along that now we are invoicing out of BigTime. We've just now started migrating to sending the invoices through BigTime. So, but yeah, I've seen a lot of changes in BigTime since the first time we started with them.
Yeah, I can second that. I've been here 6 years, and I've seen us grow and change a lot over even just that time frame.
We're a smaller company.
Yeah.
We're about 12 million with 33 employees. Not quite as big as Tamara's situation.
Yeah.
I can speak to the
Yeah.
you're talking about just the invoicing and being able to customize it for all your different clients. They have requirements and everything that they need to see. And a lot of that, I've seen all that change in BigTime over the years as well. And I love how well you can customize all the invoices, and
In the beginning, we couldn't
frees
add
you
an
up a lot.
attachment. And now we can add an attachment, a report attached, because a lot of them want a report. So now we can add those items to our invoices, which is great.
Yeah. And we grow a lot through like requests and all that, and then also things from the market. But Josiah, one of the things that you were talking about in like the prep session that I thought was really interesting, and I hear this from a lot of customers, and Diane and Tamara, I'd love to hear if you're experiencing this with yours, is this move from when I started in the professional services industry, I felt like the vast majority of billings were time and materials. Now, most clients I work with are moving towards a more fixed fee model, and being able to change and modify those billing styles. There's obviously business implications to that in terms of like the risk moves from top line revenue to margin. But Josiah, I'd love to hear from you. How's that process been transitioning to a fixed fee billing model? Because I think that's something that's top of mind for everybody. And
Yeah.
tool agnostic, what kind of drove that transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the honest truth on our side is that it's been difficult. I mean, I think one of probably the thing to point out behind that transition is that our switch to fixed fee is partly motivated, sure, for the way we're trying to run our own business internally, but it's really about pivoting kind of with the market. So one of the things that we realized was we've been doing time and materials for really since the company's inception, and it's worked really well, but we just started to realize, okay, this isn't the way people want to approach the services that we're providing to them, how they want to pay for those services, what this means across all of those factors. And so it was a bit rough, but that's partly just because it involves that paradigm change. Again, trying to map that paradigm change onto your tools and your processes and maybe multiple systems that need to work together so that you can still run things how you want to. I would say that the thing that we found a great benefit in, it's already kind of come up, is that with BigTime, one of the things that we saw in coming back was that there was going to be flexibility around how that tool could be manipulated, to say it that way. When we were in the midst of our implementation, our implementation consultant was great, partly because he was so flexible with us. We had some things that we knew we want to do exactly this. We don't want to have to adapt this to the tool, to be constrained by the tool. There was other things, of course, that we were a little more open-minded on. But one of the things that we knew was this will be able to flex with us. And so I would say, to speak to that side of things, it's actually gone quite smoothly, all things considered, right? You feel the pain points in the business operations. How are we going to retool, our systems, our processes, our paradigm? But I think we've really been able to execute that starting really the beginning of 2024 is when we made a big shift towards fixed fee. And we've really been able to do it, I would say, without kind of skipping a beat. Any of the errors and issues we've run into, again, usually are reflective of us as a company, as a team making that transition, and less so the constraints of the tool. So we've been really happy with that, to just be able to continue to invoice on time at scale, to get all of that reporting and data back out of the system as we, shift from that very time-based, hours-based mentality to something that's a little bit more fixed fee and broad.
Yeah, and one interesting discussion I had with your team, and this is a slight tangent, but I think it's important, was kind of the need to continue to track time even on fixed fee engagements, right? Because there was a thought of like, hey, with fixed fee, why are we still capturing time? And I'll hear that from the market at time to time.
Mhm.
Were you involved in that discussion at all, or like, I'm curious?
Yeah, and I'd say in some ways it's still an ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the interesting things is, again, like I mentioned earlier, I work in this team of analysts who are, of course, kind of obsessed with data, right? So we love
Yep.
the idea of, hey, let's track this, let's track this, let's track this. And there's always that question in the background of, what's going to provide the insights both for external strategy, what this means in terms of how we price ourselves, how we're
Yeah.
seeing the effectiveness of the billing models that we're, going live to the market with, but also internally. We kind of, I would say, obsess, and I mean that in a good way, as a company with performance being measured objectively. And so for our bonus structures, for our teams of recruiters and account executives, everything pivots around that profitability down to the project level, down to the individual level. And so that's been a part of that evolution, I think, is trying to go, how much is worth tracking and what insights is that going to give us? And again, so far we've found the tool to be just really helpful because we can make sure we store and capture all that data very easily. It's very intuitive, very easy to do. The timesheet grid is, you know, couldn't be simpler for our end users, but that allows us on the back end then to decide how do we want to pull this out? What analytics do we want to run on that? And again, how's that going to empower some of those key decisions that we have to make, both internal and external?
Yeah. Uh, Tomorrow, Diane, have either of you felt, and Diane, I know it's a little different for you for governmental invoicing, right? Like they're pretty fixed on how they get billed. But have you experienced the same pressure from the market from moving from time and materials for fixed fee, or have you primarily been fixed fee?
We're primarily time and materials. We
Okay.
have very few fixed fee, so I actually do find them slightly painful when I do have to do them, just because I'm so used to the other way.
Yeah.
You know, trying to find a new way of doing things.
Sure. And I think one of the things we've all talked a little bit about it, but speed to getting invoices out the door, right? Like I think it's helpful to understand. It was interesting. I looked at some data from SPI. They're the Service Performance Index. They do independent like variability. One of the very interesting metrics that I saw from them was there's a direct correlation between how quickly you get your invoices out the door and how quickly you receive payment on them. That was interesting correlation data. Have you all experienced anything around that?
Well,
I know.
the sooner the invoice walks out the door, the days start ticking for payment. So
Yeah,
yeah, we want them out as quick as possible by at the end of the month, and we need everybody's time in and approved, reviewed, approved in the right buckets. And yes, Big Time gives us the tools to do all of that. Several different reports we run at the end to make sure that every time, every hour has been included and we didn't miss any. With WIP, you can see if there's something in there that, should have been billed and make sure it gets there. So yeah, the quicker we can get those invoices out, the quicker we can get paid.
yeah. Tamara, how about yourself? I guess an interesting question is like how quickly do you think you get invoices out the door after the close of a period?
2 days, usually
Okay.
for our weeklies. We have a weekly, a bi-weekly, and a monthly cycle for
Oh,
different
nice.
clients. So we can do 1 or 2 days for weekly. Monthly, we have a larger handful of clients that are on monthly, and sometimes that takes a little bit longer. Generally, maybe I would say 5 days. Yeah, I'd echo what Diane said, probably.
Sure. Just say anything interesting for
Yeah.
you? Oh, go ahead.
We need our invoices. Our goal is invoices out the door in 7 days.
Hmm.
Big Time is not the problem. Our people are the problem. So human nature tends to interfere with everything invoicing, not necessarily the solution, not necessarily Big Time itself.
Yeah, and I hear that across our client base, by the way. For and this is when I'm consulting with our clients. One thing that I say a lot of times is, it's not necessarily like, is this a software problem or is it a people problem, right? Like I have that conversation with people all the time. Because it's people want automation out of software to do everything. And a certain element, it's like there's business process that has to surround that, right? And I've found that to be just as important as a great piece of software, is a great operational team to make sure that we're shepherding that data through as it has to go. So that's a great point.
Can I add one thing to that, Ben?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what you're pointing out there is probably what I would consider the backbone at this stage of our business growth behind why the tool does work well for our process. So we're primarily monthly. We used to do some weekly invoices. We've kind of switched that for multiple reasons, just to doing it all at month end. And again, where we came from, doing 200, 300, 400 invoices at month end, both manually, through a system that didn't always deliver that invoice to the client's, inbox, even though it said it did. I mean, pain points like that, right, are the types of things that get an internal team banging its head against the wall, because you're burning through resources and willpower with the goal of keeping your business efficient while going, I'm having to fight this tool. And I think the one thing that we've really found month to month, with, of course, sometimes where there have been either system slowdowns or some sort of glitch that has to get worked through, is being able to approach that process with a really set sense of process, pre-checks, parameters, so that once it's go time, it can just all be fired off pretty instantaneously. And I think that's, there'd be maybe other folks in the business who would go, can we get to the day where we just, the clock strikes midnight, it's the first business day, and every invoice goes out the door? And of course, if you're working internally, you're going, no, that would be the worst possible thing, because we want to make sure, of course, everything that's going out the door is correct. But I think that's the balance point, right? Is the fact that you could say, well, we still need humans behind this for multiple reasons, but we want, as soon as they're ready to go, just to feel like there's no holdups, there's no issues with things that are going to slow down the process, very automated in that sense. So that's been a huge thing for us, I think, being able to just know we can build a process that fits the tool, and the tool is not going to constrain the efficiency of that process getting executed month after month.
Yeah. And I think that's really helpful. One area we haven't touched too much on is collections. How does everybody here go about actually collecting payment from their clients? Diane, I'm going to pick on you first because you're top left on my screen.
When you mean collections, as in how are we receiving payment, or how are we getting them to pay us?
Both. There's certainly both sides of that coin.
We almost all of our clients pay us via ACH. We do have a lockbox that we receive payments to, that some are still, some county entities still cut checks. Amazes me with the mail that they, that they actually still do that. But most of our clients do pay via an ACH, not through a link in an invoice. Almost all of our, when you're dealing with a government entity, whether it's federal, state, or local, usually they have a vendor onboarding process, and that is all included in there. So they just, we just give them they have to go by their parameters and fill out their packet, which I actually just did for someone, and send that in, and that determines how we're paid.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's the element of, like, I think everybody'd love to be on online payments, but sometimes there's just the reality of, especially in that SLED space, like it can always be challenging to do that. Tamara, how about yourself? How are you collecting payments today?
Well, as far as chasing them, I usually would start in QuickBooks, but I've slowly been digging back into BigTime and utilizing just like the bulk feature, to follow up just with a few clicks. You can hit all of your past due invoices with one email, and it really makes the collections fly. So that's a great tool to have. Doesn't work for everything, sometimes you need to send a statement, but if I'm following up on individual invoices, that's the way to go, is using BigTime for it.
I have a question for Tamara. Who do you sell to? I mean, who are your end users for what your services? Are they commercial, or are they
Yeah, commercial, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, with government, you kind of can't, well, for one, we do not have any issues with collections at all. Like we've got a great turnaround on that. But with the government, usually it doesn't work to email them or anything. Like they're on a schedule, it gets approved, but
Mm-hmm.
almost everybody we have government-wise pays on time. They do sometimes have a longer approval process, but we've not had any issues to follow up. But I like the feature that you can multiple at one time and you're not just
Yeah.
shooting off one email, here and there.
Yeah. Josiah, I'm curious for yourself,
Yeah.
payment collection.
Yeah. So we work primarily with small to mid-size businesses. So at this point in time, we're still receiving a lot of checks. We, of course, have the desire to do as much ACH as possible just to make life a little simpler.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a process that, we're just continuing to work and get clients comfortable making that transition. Um, for some of our enterprise clients, again, they might have payment portals and different, kind of hoops that we need to jump through. But one of the things that I thought I'd just point out, kind of distinct from some of the things already mentioned in terms of chasing payment, is internally once a month we're always going through the company financials with everybody who's a part of Titus. And there's lots of things that get highlighted in that presentation, kind of in the effort of transparency. But one of the thing, or two of the things that I think really stick out about that, because of course we have an AR team that's doing the kind of the heavy lifting, chasing the people who just for some reason claim that they never got the email, even though we can see it right there in BigTime and that, client has viewed the invoice 22 times. But we report internally on that presentation to do with our AR aging. So everybody's getting a snapshot month to month, from our recruiters to our account execs. Here is where, as a company, our AR aging is sitting in terms of our 90+ bucket. And we're also reporting on write-offs that are happening month to month. Now, for our team, we've got a lot of kind of internal competition, again, in a good way. It's one of the things that we kind of love about our culture is that friendly competitive spirit. And
Yep.
so, even though we have an AR team, for our kind of client facing personnel to suddenly have kind of vested interest in saying, I really want to get to the end of the year with our division having either 0 write-offs for the year or at least a minimal, right? There's a leaderboard, that's getting reported. Here's the team leading the way with the fewest amount of write-offs. And here's what's happening in terms of AR. And I think those two things, maybe a little bit unconventional, depending on the company, and some that sometimes maybe can't be shared across a company, across divisions. But for us, I think that's just kind of another element that does help in tandem with the tools like seeing those kind of read receipts, seeing who's actually viewed the invoice multiple times, how long it's been sitting there, because it helps mobilize our team, hopefully, as we all would wish for, to have a friendly, mutually helpful conversation with our clients, right? When we are overdue, but trusting that that's going to come through rather than, of course, the route most of us don't want to go, which is either writing off the revenue or having to pursue it, in terms of legally or through collections, that sort of a thing.
Yeah, and that brings up, and it's such an interesting point. You said something that I actually encourage almost all of our clients to do, which is to push some of the AR collection responsibility down to the people that hold the relationships with the clients rather than having it purely come from your finance team. And that's where having a tool like BigTime in place really helps, because I don't know anybody that wants their sales folks in their QuickBooks account. If they can possibly avoid it. So it's like being able to give that exposure and then do all of that. Shameless plug, we do have a client portal as well where people can log in and see and pay invoices as well. Um, like we're But we don't have to get too deep into that. We are kind of at the 30-minute mark, so I'll ask our panelists one kind of final questions. So we've got somebody who's been on and off BigTime, a couple of very long time users. What are the best results you typically see from having a tool like BigTime in place in terms of versus in prior years and in management experiences? So Josiah, I'm gonna pick on you first because you've probably got the cleanest story about that.
Yeah, I don't want to be too broad in answering that, but it kind of comes around to something I mentioned earlier, which is I think, you want systems to work for you. You don't want to be working for the system. Maybe that's a little too cheesy of a catchphrase, and it's much easier to say than it is to do. But I know for us, so we've got a headcount between 150 and 200 employees. There's lots of siloed systems at this point. That's just the reality of where we're at in our business growth. We're comfortable with that because we know we're not there yet to where we want to stuff everything inside an ERP. We also, of course, have grown a lot in terms of saying we got to make sure our systems are talking to each other. We got to make sure we're unified around a source of truth. But the reason I'm pointing that out is that I think there's always this constant wrestle, of course, of where this threshold is of, am I working for the tool or is the tool working for me? But I think, for us, our experience really over the last few years since coming back to Big Time is that being able to be, first off, honest with ourselves, which is what are we needing out of the tool? And are we equipped to get there? And, again, when we came back, it was clear, okay, this is going to help make sure there's alignment in that regard, kind of those technical needs, technical specs. But I think beyond that, the other reality is that when things break, as we evolve and maybe hit a brick wall and scratch our heads and go, how are we going to do this? How are we going to pull off what we need to for this next phase of growth, this next initiative? I think it comes down to people in some ways. And I know that in our experience with Big Time, we've been able to, again, just kind of say, honestly, here's what we are using. We're massively dependent on all the reporting, exporting. We're doing increasingly less with time tracking, which is kind of an odd thing to say, but the reality is that's fitting where we're at. And to have that web of support and really input to help drive us forward without attitudes getting weird or feeling like we're somehow not using the tool how we're supposed to. That's been really positive. It's been very helpful because that's not what we've always found. We've done, I think, 3 or 4 implementations of other key systems since my time at Titus. And you just don't always find that people are willing to help you dial in that tool. So again, so that it's working for you rather than you working for it. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I'd underscore, a little bit broad, but makes a huge difference and was very different than the previous time and billing system we came from, where increasingly we just knew they're not happy with us. They don't want to see us, kind of adapt and change and dial this into our needs. And ultimately that was really what caused us to start looking. I think that's kind of a lesson in some ways to really what people are looking for, which is of course the technical side, but also just a sense of this tool really is going to work for me and empower what I'm trying to do as a business.
Yeah. I could talk for 2 hours on this topic, but I won't go too deep into it. My opinions in that. But Diane, it'd be helpful to hear from you.
I think it's changed using Big Time versus what we had before. And you kind of hit on that. You're right. I don't want them in my QuickBooks. I don't want those guys in there. They're going to touch it. They're going to do something with it that they don't need to do. But this gives them a view of their projects. I love the dashboard now that they can go see. We use the allocations so we can see who's on the bench, who's got time, who doesn't have time, who maybe we need to talk to about their time they are spending on, things that are not billable. But ultimately, it truly did give our project managers access to see exactly what their project is doing. Because previously, we would get to the financials and, I would run a project report out of QuickBooks and, I didn't know that. Even though a lot of these guys, they've got their own stuff, they got their spreadsheets on the side. But it does turn out a lot of times that what's in the books is a little different than what they thought was in the project. And now we match. We're able to match them so that the financial information that I have matches what they're seeing and they can get to it. So there are no surprises. So it's been great.
Awesome. And then tomorrow.
Yeah, I actually hadn't mentioned this before, but I mean, there was a brief time where we had left Big Time and tried some new software, and it didn't work out for multiple reasons. We did come back to Big Time, and I think the big thing was just it's the consistency. You know where everything is, you know how everything flows. The reporting is very robust. It meets all of our needs. The ability to customize all of the reports it's gives us a really great ability for forecasting. And our leadership team is just always looking ahead. That's one of the things I love about the company that we work for. And I think every company at some point is going to be sitting in a good place or a bad place. We've all been there, right? But I think as long as you can keep looking ahead and using these forecasting tools, BigTime can help you do that.
Great. I love hearing that. I'll summarize a few of our key takeaways, and then I will also remind everybody the chat and questions are open. So please do feel free to type in your questions as we come up. We're going to leave some time at the end for questions for our panelists, or selfishly me. But we can go through a few of our key takeaways. So we talked a little bit about a lot. I think we touched on almost every single point on this, right? Like, so talking about DSO reduction through automation, right? Being able to get people invoices out the door faster, get people to pay them more quickly, being able to take actions in bulk, especially when you're a high invoicing volume shop, that can be really, really helpful. Optimizing invoicing workflow, right? Keep people in the systems to which they work and put the right data in front of the people at the right time. That's always what I say is like the key for like a good workflow for this operational flow within a services firm. We actually didn't talk too much about the QuickBooks integration, but that's okay. But the seamless two-way integration with QuickBooks, we've been partners with Intuit for over 20 years at this point, and being able to make sure that the data hits your chart of accounts as you would expect it. You're generating the right transactions at the right time without interfering with the way that you run QuickBooks. You don't have to change the way you run QuickBooks to work with a system like BigTime. And then like cash flow gains without client disruption, right? So it's that seamless communication piece, being able to communicate more effectively with our clients, and get some internal improvements around that process as well, putting the clients in the right place. So with that, I'll actually take us over to Q&A. I saw a couple of questions flow in. So I've got one here from Katrina. Do you have any webinars or resources regarding work with intercompany transactions, invoicing, tracking allocation expenses? And this sounds like, Katrina, sounds like a specific question for the new IES product. I'm going to refer that to our friends at Intuit to get specific with you on those questions. On all of that is usually that's handled on the Intuit side of the house, whether it's through QuickBooks or the new IES product. But I will go ahead and make sure that we get that answered. We'll get that answer over to you quickly. So a couple other questions coming in. At one question from Lacey: what payment process are we able to use with BigTime for billing clients? Specifically, I use CPA charge. Will it work with that? Lacey, if you use CPA charge, you could embed that link directly in the invoice. We could do that. We do also offer payment processing directly in platform through BigTime Wallet. So you can, if you wanted to take a look at that, there'll be an opportunity to fill out a demo request, and I can get you some more information on that as well. Cool. Another question that came in, and just say I'm going to direct this one at you because I know you most recently did this. How long did it take you to get up and running on BigTime? And I know you weren't directly involved in the project, but what was the internal feedback like around that?
Yeah, that's a good question. When we came back, I think we probably started meeting with our implementation consultant probably around July 2022. Maybe it was August. And then we kind of had a go live of October 1st. So I don't know how that compared to maybe other implementations for folks, but I know for us, it was, I'll say it this way, it was frantic only because we were at a stage of having lost two people on the team. The system we were migrating from was extremely difficult and uncooperative in terms of us extracting data, because we knew a huge priority of ours was we want all of this history. I mean,
Yep.
Hundreds of thousands of time entries, thousands of invoices, et cetera, to come over. So in that sense, it was very frantic, but that really wasn't anything to do with, the BigTime side of things. That was just the system we came from was rapidly breaking. We kind of reached out to BigTime, said we want to do this as fast as possible because we need a solution, right?
Yep.
But what I would say in terms of the overall process was it was extremely straightforward. I look at, again, kind of 2 or 3 other implementations we've done since with other platforms. And I think the ability to organize our data, send it over for import, getting the whole site set up the way we wanted it to, permissions dialed in, which is a big deal for us in terms of the types of end users we were going to have in platform. All of that was really straightforward. And so kind of joking to just relay the reality of our experience of where we were as a business. But I would say on the scope of the implementations I've been a part of and or led, it was really straightforward. And again, the BigTime team that we were working with was just able to kind of roll with our punches. So we were very relieved that first month. Everything's in system, linked up, and then we were able to invoice really without dropping a beat because we went full cold turkey. It was September was our final month in the previous platform. We knew every invoice in October is coming out of BigTime, and we were able to do that without hitting any really big roadblocks in that sense.
That is awesome. That is also not what I recommend, but that's great that it worked.
Absolutely. Yeah, neither would I. Yeah.
For what it's worth for folks on the call, I typically recommend you have like a 30-day cutover period when you're transitioning from systems, just in case. Like there's always the factor of like things happen. But I'm glad to hear that we're able to do that. And to answer your question, Josiah, that's a little on the short end of average for that for us. For an account your size, I usually say 45 to 90 days is kind of the average size. If you're someone like more like Diane's size, that's usually a 30 to 45 day initial implementation. And then the longest will go 45 to 90. If you're truly an enterprise organization, maybe that runs to 120. Maybe, but that would be you're at multiple thousands of resources for an implementation that long usually. But a couple other questions in the chat. Like I have a question about migrating QuickBooks, the BigTime integration, and this is from Laura. From QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, I believe that tasks in BigTime are included in the service item links, but I wanted to confirm. You can confirm that is indeed the case. And I've heard that some folks tend to put tasks in BigTime and rename them to other things to what is in QuickBooks. Would the information come over as is into QuickBooks, or this data need to be lost and mapped? In general, Laura, best practice, I can map service items to almost any object in BigTime, the project, the task, the labor category. And then you can make sure that those are carried through on both your posting time and expense entries, if you're posting time and expense entries directly over, or those can be posted over as part of like the service item. And then generally the name of the task would come through as the description on the invoice. So you are able to do that and actually get that handled. I'll take some selfish questions too while we're in here. One other question from Andrea, and then this will be last call for questions because then we'll go into some wrap up and give everybody back a couple minutes in their day. I have a small business with just 17 clients with myself as the only employee. Would BigTime be a good fit, or am I too small? My personal opinion, that's right about the right size to start thinking about it. It sounds like, Andrea, you're working with a lot of contractors. BigTime does nice work with like contractor bases, or I'm sorry, it's just yourself as a solo employee. Yeah, it certainly can be a good fit. Happy to connect you with somebody to chat it through. Usually our clients will start coming to us once they start getting either yourself plus a few contractors that you need to capture time and expenses for. I would say between now and when you get to about 3 to 5 resources is a good time to start thinking about it. That would be on the smaller end of our clients. But any other questions? I guess maybe, Diane, I'll ask you to touch on that a little bit. So you're on the smaller size. How many total resources do you have at your firm? You're muted. You're still muted.
We have 33.
Okay.
That's outside contractors. Our back office is very slim, so most everybody on that number is billable.
Okay.
So yeah, we definitely have to have have to have something like BigTime or BigTime itself to manage our time entry.
And do you remember how many folks you had when you started?
We're probably not about the same, 20 something maybe.
Okay.
About the same.
Yeah. So I guess they say in terms of that in terms of that question, Andrea, like I'd suggest reaching out. I can connect you with one of our SMB account executives, Blake or Keith. Both super sharp, and they can walk you through whether or not it makes sense. Maybe a 20-30 minute call, but there'll be an opportunity if you want. There's in that resources section an opportunity to go through that. All right. So, speaking of which, here's this, like I say, if you are interested in learning a little bit more about what BigTime offers, but with anything that I had, you go ahead and scan that QR code or visit that link there. Happy to spend some time on that. I'll just say my email out loud, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn, but my email is bmascow@bigtime.net if you have any specific questions. And like I said, we can go through all of that. We do have some upcoming webinars here within where this is next week. I'm going to actually be running that one as well. So if you want to spend some more time with me, we're going to be talking more instead of about the billing and invoicing. We're going to be talking about future facing capabilities of BigTime, being able to plan for resources, plan revenue, and start to get some of that information into play. And then, like I said, I don't know that I have a slide for it, but I do know that also we do want to make sure that we're plugging the upcoming QuickBooks Connect in October. So that is a really good time and place to be through that. With that, I know we're a couple minutes over, so I wanted to say thank you all very, very much for attending. Diane, Josiah, Tamara, again, you were so generous with your time on this, so thank you so much. The recording will come out in a follow-up from this, but thank you all so very much. I appreciate all your time.